And we continue at 2:06 in the afternoon on the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang's in New Mexico.
John, it is the end of an era for airport security theater, as the TSA says people now in the general line no longer have to take off their shoes.
Well, the next thing they should do is they need to stop confiscating deodorant and toothpaste. Because if there's anything the world needs more of, it's deodorant and toothpaste.
Especially on Spirit.
Yeah, no kidding. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is a familiar face, a familiar voice, a familiar writer to those of you who read the LA Times for years and years and years, where his syndicated column appeared each and every week. You can follow him on X at Cal Thomas. Cal Thomas, welcome.
Well, thanks very much. Nice to be back with you.
Well, thanks so much for stopping by. So I want to play some sound for you of a podcaster. This podcaster, I guess, was able to land a sit-down with then Democratic nominee Kamala Harris when she was running for president. And her team wanted her to expose herself to all the kids that are voting for the first time. Maybe they're in their 20s. They saw Donald Trump doing all the podcasts, so they decided we should do the same thing. So they put her on this left-wing podcast, and they thought, okay, this is going to be a home run. This podcaster now says that her appearance was such a disaster and was so disqualifying for her as a candidate that her campaign met with him after the interview, and they both agreed that the interview would never be aired because he said if the interview aired, she would have lost the election because of things that she said in that interview, and he would be blamed, and he did not want to take the blame for her losing the election. Let's listen.
He emailed me.
They emailed, like an email from the
DNC.
Okay.
And they said, hey, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are really interested in being on your show. I said, that sounds cool.
Okay.
I'll at least get to tell my daughter that I met the potential president of the United States.
Yeah.
And so I said yes, based on the fact that it would be a good story. And also they both had good takes.
What happened with Kamala?
Her take was really confusing and weird and not good. And so mutually agreed that we shouldn't publish it.
I see.
And I got lucky because I didn't want to be blamed for her losing.
Her take was that bad?
It was really, really bad, and it was like didn't make any sense. I can tell you, it was bacon as a spice. Bacon as a spice.
Bacon as a spice.
Cal, as someone who has written about politicians and interviewed politicians for a long time, have you ever seen one as unprepared as Kamala Harris? And have you ever seen one where the media, whether it be the mainstream media or the friendly media, did as much heavy lifting as humanly possible and still couldn't push the candidate over the finish line?
Well, it reminds me of the CBS 60 Minutes interview that got some controversy and a big settlement out of Paramount for Donald Trump. Kamala Harris has been described as a word salad. I'd like to know if she uses vinaigrette on it or some other substance. Now she's thinking about running for governor of California. I mean, as bad as Gavin Newsom is, at least he has a good look. I don't think California deserves Kamala Harris, but who knows? Anything's possible in that state, as you know.
Well, think about this for a second, because we saw her performance, not just reading about or hearing about her performance in this particular interview, but you mentioned 60 Minutes. We saw what they had to do there. We saw her essentially melt down her campaign on The View when she was asked if she would have done anything different than Joe Biden over the last 4 years, and she said she couldn't think of anything. Allegedly, according to the people around her, she's interested in federal subjects. She's interested in international conflict. She's interested in abortion. She's interested in the Supreme Court. Those are subjects, in theory, that she's read about, she's thought about, she has ideas about. And even to the people who have been covering her for a long time, she doesn't care about California subjects. She doesn't care about our budget crisis or our insurance crisis or name the problem that we're facing on a daily basis here. if this is the level of performance that she turns in on subjects that she's interested in, can you imagine what type of candidate for a state office she will make on subjects that she has zero interest in?
Well, I mean, I'm interested in a lot of things too, but that doesn't mean I'm qualified for it. I'm interested in basketball. I played it in high school and college, but I couldn't perform in the NBA today. What is this business about being interested in things? How ridiculous is that? She's just a politician looking for a place to land. A lot of these people, I like to say the only politicians with convictions in Washington are those in prison. But these people have never had a real job. They've never hired anybody other than government staff, and they're just looking for a place to land. I just think she's a disaster. She should go teach at one of these liberal universities. I don't think she's qualified to be governor of California or anything else. If you reject, at least Nixon went back to California and managed to reinvent himself and get elected president. I don't think she has a hope of doing that. As far as being interested in things, I'm reminded of the great line from Groucho Marx, who said, "I have principles. If you don't like them, I have others."
If you're the Democratic Party, though, what do you do with her? Because she has the highest name ID right now in your party of the prospective candidates. So you do an early poll, and she finishes first, way above everyone else. Now, that doesn't mean that's where she'll be when they end up voting in Iowa, New Hampshire, or however they make the calendar next time around in the Democratic Party. So she may come back down to reality. If she gets elected to be governor of California, it's not as if she's just a former vice president or a former Democratic candidate for president. She would be the governor of the most populated state in the union, and she would probably be a candidate for president next time around, and that's a problem you seriously don't want. If you're the Democratic Party, do you try to make sure she doesn't win this race in California so you solve that problem once and for all?
I don't think it's going to make any difference. I think the party is trying to move on. It's trying to reinvent itself. It doesn't want to go back to the past, even the recent past. Whatever hope she might have as being governor of California, if, in fact, she decides to run, she's not going to be the nominee for the Democrat Party. I mean, they know that she was a complete disaster, she and Biden, and people don't want to be reminded of it. So they're going to move on to somebody else who's far more articulate, which won't take very much, I might add, and perhaps more experience. But I don't think she'd get elected even in California if she ran.
Well, let's talk about one of those other potential candidates, California Governor Gavin Newsom, who, despite the fact that it's now the 6-month anniversary since the fires in Pacific Palisades and Altadena, he is not here in California banging heads trying to make that process move faster. He is now in South Carolina and meeting with the former Democratic governor, Governor Hodges, meeting with Jamie Harrison, the former chair of the DNC, meeting with people at diners in small towns, traveling around the state of South Carolina. He says he's not a presidential candidate, has no interest in the office at all, but he's just there to meet new people and talk about how red states are failing their constituents and what we're doing here in California and how that could be helpful for their lives. What do you make of what Gavin Newsom is doing right now as Rome burns?
I think it's great that he's going to the diners in South Carolina. It's a big come down from the French Laundry. So I think that he's a man of the people now. Look, he's as phony as Kansas in August, high as a kite on the 4th of July. You know that song? If you'll excuse an expression I use, I'm in love with a wonderful guy. I don't think, he's there campaigning, regardless of what he says in South Carolina, but it's still early. I mean, we just had an election last November, and already they're talking about 2028. It just never stops, and I think people are tired of this kind of thing. I certainly hope they are anyway. The Democrats got to figure out what they believe in first before they pick a candidate. It used to be the other way around. But they don't know what they believe in. They're taking polls, they're trying to audition people, and they're just in total disarray. So I think if they don't come up with some kind of a platform or a belief system, why should people vote for them?
They just had a election in New York City, a Democratic primary to see who the Democrats would nominate to be the next mayor. And a candidate who is a socialist ended up winning that race. He is not a socialist in the mold of AOC or even Bernie Sanders. This guy believes that the government should own the means of production and has said so repeatedly throughout his political life. Democratic voters were given the option of choosing Andrew Cuomo, the former governor, who many bold-faced names in the Democratic Party got behind. Instead, they chose the socialist candidate. Do you see this as being a one-off, or do you see this as being something that's going to be a problem for Democrats in the future? And I say that because they have a leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, who is deeply unpopular both in New York and nationwide. He is certainly in danger of losing his leadership position if the party turns on him, and even his seat in New York if he were to be primaried. But you look at this Democratic nomination process for president, and I could very easily see a scenario where the Democratic Party, the bigwigs in the party, lose control of their own nomination process to a candidate like the one that we saw in New York City, the same way that the Republicans, by the way, lost control in 2016 when all of the power brokers wanted Jeb and Donald Trump came along and the people fell in love with him. I could see a very similar situation in the Democratic Party where you get the donors behind one candidate, but then the voters go in a totally different direction and they pick a disruptor.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And this guy, Mamdani, I think the Republicans, all they have to do, not in New York, because no matter who the eventual Democrat nominee is, and you've got still others lined up, including the current Mayor Adams, and I hope Cuomo drops out because he's totally discredited in every category you can think of. But I think all the Republicans have to do is show those bread lines in the old Soviet Union and what happens when the state runs grocery stores. Mamdani wants to take over grocery stores. Now, how's that going to work out? You got a grocery store, you've invested your money in it, your life savings or whatever, and along comes a politician and says, I'm going to take over your grocery store. That's the ultimate in socialism. I think Republicans have got a great issue there. They're going to have to ask Democrats across the country, do you endorse this guy and his policies? Do you believe in what he believes? Even Hakeem Jeffries has been very reluctant until the past couple of days to say anything good about Mamdani because they're going to be stuck with him if he wins the election in New York. Republicans are going to ask Democrats all across the country running in 2026, do you endorse this guy or not? It's going to be fun to watch them squirm.
I mentioned this before on the air here, but in California, we had a socialist who won the Democratic nomination for governor at some point in the past. It was Upton Sinclair, who ran on the EPIC program, the End Poverty in California, where he wanted the state of California to be in charge of the farms, the factories, film production, you name it. He wanted the state of California to run it. And what happened in that election was that many of the people who worked for FDR, who was president at the time, got behind this guy and worked for his campaign and advised him. But FDR didn't. FDR was very hesitant to have any sort of public association with him. And I do not believe, I could be wrong, but I do not believe he ever formally endorsed the candidate. Now, at that time, his son Jimmy was involved in California politics, so he had other interests in what happened in the state and making sure that his son had a future. But let's just say for one moment that the Democratic Party nationally loses control of their nomination process. And instead of getting a Shapiro or a Newsom or a Whitmer or someone like that, they end up with Democratic nominee for president AOC or Democratic nominee for president Jasmine Crockett or someone like that. What do they do? If you want a future in Democratic politics, if you're a Democratic donor, you're a businessman, but you really believe in legalized marijuana or abortion or gay rights or whatever, but you want your business to succeed. What do those people do if the Democrats decide to lose their mind and get behind an AOC?
I think they're going to have to campaign for a return to the old smoke-filled room. You may not be old enough to remember that, but that's when these professional politicians got together and decided who the best candidate would be to run for president and to win the election. They don't do that anymore. You've got a lot of these young people, you mentioned New York, coming out of these universities, which basically are socialist institutions, teaching envy, greed, and entitlement, not inspiration followed by motivation, followed by perspiration. And this is what they vote for. It sounds good. Socialism always sounds good until it's tried. And then it gets rejected. Or if, in the case of Venezuela and some other socialist, even communist countries, it gets imposed at a level where you can't overthrow it without a revolution. So this has been tried before, and I think we have a history, a world history, and what happens when you elect these kind of people or they take over, and it's a disaster for most people. But they play on the whole envy business. You know, the rich, we've got to tax the rich. The rich aren't paying their fair share. We have heard that since the Roosevelt administration, campaigning against the rich. Well, the poor don't hire people. The rich hire people. They produce corporations. They produce employees who produce taxes for the government. As Reagan used to say, the last great governor of California, we have a debt, for example, not because the American people are taxed too little, but because their government spends too much. That's the kind of thing that needs to be taught and reinforced in this country. When taxes are low, when regulations are cut, then the people prosper at all levels. And that's what Donald Trump is doing right now. And the Democrats are frustrated because they're prisoners of their own past and their own failed ideology, and they don't know where the exit door is.
I'll leave you with this. Before they tried it in New York City, they tried it in Chicago, and that mayor is currently sitting at an 8% approval rating, which has to be somewhere near where COVID is.
Right, exactly right. But they keep electing these people. I mean, this guy, Johnson in Chicago, makes the former mayor look pretty good by comparison. It's just amazing. It's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
Cal Thomas, you can get him online at calthomas.com and follow him on X at Cal Thomas. Cal, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, with the end of the show quickly approaching, if you want to continue listening to us after we sign off at 3, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is search for The John Phillips Show wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's the Apple Podcasts app, iHeart, Spotify. Search for The John Phillips Show. Hit subscribe. You could download all the episodes. You could do a Google on the YouTube. Every episode of the show gets automatically posted to YouTube. So search for The John Phillips Show. Like and subscribe. Share it with your friends. Post it on Facebook. Download our apps, the KABC app, the KSFO app. And the great thing about these podcasts is you can listen to them anywhere, no matter what you're doing. You could be listening to these podcasts while you're stuck in a drive-thru.
Go forward! No!
Or you can be listening to us when you're in Fresno.
That's because we do the Fix California Hour on Saturdays from 2 to 3 now on KMJ in Fresno. That's AM 580 and 105.9 FM in the Central Valley. You can also stream that live at kmjnow.com.
Coming up next, we'll have more on Gavin Newsom going to South Carolina. He says he's not campaigning for president. What the hell is he doing going to diners in a state that he doesn't live in? And Randy, Northern California Congressman Eric Swalwell just weighed in on what happened at MacArthur Park yesterday.
He put out on Twitter, MacArthur Park is not a war zone. It's a playground, a picnic spot, a community spot. But you wouldn't know that looking at it now. Why would you send armed agents to terrorize a community?
It's just insane to me that they can go on social media or go on TV and lie like that and people believe it, including people who live here who won't go anywhere near that park because they know it's a violent place. But if you ask them now, is MacArthur Park fine? Oh, yeah, it's great.
Well, and he's from Northern California. He's probably never been to MacArthur Park. He posted a link to the LA Times story about this, and I can't read it because I'm not paying for that damn subscription, but I guarantee you there's not a word in that LA Times story about what really goes on in MacArthur Park.
No, it's just like the MTA, where they go on TV and they say, oh, the MTA's safe. You don't have anything to worry about on those buses or subways or trains. And the dummies that believe them go on, and whatever happens, happens. And if you live to tell about it, you might disagree. But they're doing the same thing with the park that they do with the trains. If you just say it enough times, then I guess they think that people will believe that it's safe. And the people who vote for them probably will. And what they're doing, whether they know it or not, is they're putting their own people in harm's way, because I'm not going to believe them. You're not going to believe them. But Eric Swalwell does have a fan base out there. And maybe some of them will show up to that park. Wear a bulletproof vest. Bring some protection if you do. You'll need it. All right. Well, all of this is going on. Gavin Newsom is in the state of South Carolina campaigning for president. Although if you ask him if he's running for president, he'll say he has sub-zero interest.
Alex even asked him at the presser yesterday, do you still have sub-zero interest? But Ashley Zavala is here to tell us exactly what the hell Gavin Newsom says he's doing in South Carolina.
And Governor Gavin Newsom tonight is making his way to South Carolina.
Yeah, this trip to the nation's south, further fueling some speculation that he's running for president. We've been hearing that quite a bit in the past several months. KCRA 3 Capitol correspondent.
If this was just for some meeting about disaster relief, he could have zoomed in because, you know, there are several fires going on in the state right now. He might want to stay here.
Oh, no. There is bigger jobs to do over in diners in South Carolina.
Ashley Zavala joins us now. So, okay, why South Carolina, Ashley?
Golston, it depends on who you ask. If you ask Newsom's campaign and the South Carolina Democratic Party, it's to help Democrats in that state reach out to rural voters. If you ask the
what do they need Gavin for that for?
A guy from San Francisco is going to South Carolina to teach Democratic candidates in that state how to talk to rural voters.
Okay.
If you ask the governor, it's to talk about the need for bipartisan disaster relief. But if you ask political strategists, it's to pursue his presidential ambitions. So specifically, Governor Newsom tomorrow and Wednesday will swing through and speak with voters in these South Carolina counties: Marion, Chesterfield, Marlboro, Lawrence, Pickens, Oconee, Kershaw, and Florence counties. And
I couldn't have done that. Good for you, Ashley.
That's a lot of ground he's covering in 2 days.
In a statement,
it's campaign stops. What is he doing?
And you look at the stops. He's meeting with politicians. He's going to diners. He's going to the black churches. Everything candidates for president do.
In a statement, the chairwoman of the South Carolina Democratic Party said, quote, Governor Newsom leads the largest economy in America and the fourth largest in the world. And he's coming to meet folks in towns that have been hollowed out by decades of Republican control. This is about building partnerships, uplifting communities, and showing rural voters they are not forgotten. Newsom's campaign denies this has anything to do with the governor running for president in 2028. But South Carolina is a key political battleground. And though it is not yet scheduled, but is expected to be among the first states to vote in the 2028 presidential primary again, the governor today maintained he's heading there to talk about disaster relief.
Sure.
And then he has his bitchy spokesman who defends him on social media.
Is he?
Here's what the governor had to say when asked about this and the real reason for this trip.
You don't know that. I don't know that. And so that's why I would suggest it's what it is. It's been an ongoing issue for me to work with governors, not just Democratic governors, but Republican governors, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and others that have been impacted, and get the support at the subnational level, meaning at the gubernatorial level. We've been doing it through the DGA with Democrats, working now with the NGA. We've been up on the Hill, the Capitol, and now we're starting to reach out directly to governors. It won't be the last state, and there'll be other.
Boy, he's getting gravelly.
Let me guess. He's going to meet with people in, I don't know, Iowa, maybe New Hampshire, maybe Nevada. those are the places just randomly are going to be on his travel schedule?
And there'll be other states that are off the map. So the cynics out there can sort of, I think, resolve any of their anxiety or growing cynicism.
Are we still at sub-zero interest in running for president?
Oh, God. I mean, Jesus.
I love how indignant he gets when he's asked about that.
I think he was already working on his southern drawl there.
Or growing cynicism.
Are we still at sub-zero interest in running for president?
Oh, God. I mean, Jesus.
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 Oh, God. I mean, Jesus.
Oh, God, I mean Jesus. He's in the South, so he's got to reference Jesus specifically.
Okay, so he's not completely rejecting the interest like he has in years past, but he also didn't answer that last question about whether or not he's interested in the presidency. I checked in with Democratic strategist Steve Maviglio for his reaction to Newsom's campaign denying that this has anything to do with the presidency.
We've gone from a, quote, sub-zero interest in being president to an overt interest in being president. And I think he wakes up every morning, looks in the mirror and says, I want to be president. How do I do it? And that's why we're seeing his increased presence on a national scale. We're seeing on a...
You know how you would do it? You would actually get this state running properly, and then you have that to run on. But he hasn't done that.
Well, he can't do that.
And that's why we're seeing his increased presence on a national scale. We're seeing it on social media. We're seeing him engaging Trump nearly every day, trolling Trump's tweets. And while that might be very good for President...
Wouldn't it be great if he did his day job?
He has no interest in that, because then he'd have to work with the insurance industry and he'd have to work with the legislature on the budget, and there's nothing to be gained by doing that.
And while that might be very good for presidential politics, I don't think it's going to be very beneficial for California. The president has retaliated already in so many ways against California, talking about withholding billions and billions of dollars in funding that we need. And so it's a double-edged sword for the governor.
What Maviglio mentioned there that we should highlight, the governor is riding this surge in popularity he's seeing in political polls and on social media. That popularity stemming from his feud with the president over the immigration raids and protests in Los Angeles. Goes back to you.
All right, Ashley, thank you for that.
So there you go. Gavin in South Carolina,
who is decidedly not a candidate for president of these United States. And we believe him, just like we believe Eric Swalwell when he says that MacArthur Park was a peaceful place where families go to gather. It's just unreal how dumb they think we are. Well, ever since the raid started here in California, people are posting pictures of the traffic grid and showing a whole lot of green and not a whole lot of red. Well, if there's anything that can be done to make traffic move faster in the state of California, even in left-wing, deep blue California, maybe they'll support it. In Florida, they're trying something a little bit different. Randy, in the Sunshine State, they're phasing out the diamond lanes.
HOV lanes, carpool lanes, whatever you call them, the governor of Florida just signed a bill that makes it so they don't count anymore. They are just like a regular lane that anybody can use. For more on this, we go to WPBF 25 in Florida. This showed up on my YouTube feed. I thought it was interesting. We're going to watch it.
New at 6, you will still see these signs out on I-95, but starting today, they're no longer enforceable. A new state law is ending the HOV lanes in Florida, meaning anybody can drive in these lanes at any time.
They're going to have to change all the weird dots and the yellow lines that people aren't supposed to cross, but they cross anyway.
That may take a while.
The law ends a benefit for drivers of electric vehicles, but it also ends the perk.
You know, I'm the owner of an electric car, and I never even applied for one of those stickers because I have never once been on the 405 when it was jammed where the carpool lane was actually moving.
No, when the freeway is jammed, so is the carpool lane.
For vehicles with more than one passenger.
Traffic anchor Yasmin Julmis explains the change and what drivers are saying about it.
Effective today, HOV lanes in Florida are no longer. Governor Ron DeSantis signed Senate Bill 1662 last month, which covers a range of transportation changes, and the repealing of carpool lanes being one of them. While you may still see the signs up, the rules and what some may call perks no longer apply.
I mean, it feels like this is long overdue. When's the last time you saw anyone use one of those park and ride lots?
Yeah. When I was a child, and there were a bunch of the dads of kids I went to school with who worked at McDonnell Douglas, or they worked at the various aerospace factories on the assembly line, you would have situations where there would be a van and they would all meet in one place and they would all ride in the van together to the plant, and they would work their shift, and then the van would take them back to the area where they left their cars. That was something that was somewhat common. But when manufacturing left, and when things like, department stores and other places of work like that, where you have a lot of people commuting from similar places, working the same shift, you could do it. But now that's not how the world works, especially since COVID, where you have a lot of people who work from home, a lot of people who only go into the office 1 or 2 days a week. You don't have that van service like you used to have when people worked at the factories. Right now, if you benefit from the Diamond Lane, you benefit because you and your spouse are going to dinner, or you and the kids are going to Disneyland, or people who you would otherwise be traveling with, whether or not you got access to the Diamond Lane or not, just happen to be with you. So if it's a benefit of chance, or a benefit of whether or not you're in a relationship or you have a family, whatever the case may be, it's not as if it's reducing the number of cars on the road. The same number of cars are on the road. You're just providing the benefit to people who happen to qualify for reasons unrelated to how many emissions are being put into the air. So, yeah, I think they're doing a good job, and it's time to get rid of it.
More than 25,000 Florida drivers of hybrid and other low-emission vehicles who were allowed to use HOV lanes with a special decal, regardless of the number of people in the car, will no longer benefit. Most people we spoke to in our area were hearing about the change for the first time today.
No, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that. That's really exciting news for me.
Well, he's going to continue to drive in the car lane, the Diamond Lane, rather. It's just now he can do it legally.
It's really exciting news for me because I travel most of the time in highway, especially south.
I think it was better when you needed 2 people or more on that lane.
I think sometimes
as soon as they added the decals, those lanes got clogged up instantly, and there really was never any benefit to the carpool lane.
Well, especially here in California, where every other person is now driving an electric car.
I think sometimes the HOV lanes are a little confusing with the signage, and people don't totally obey them anyway. I like having the express lanes that are designated and that you pay for with your SunPass.
Palm Beach County Tax Collector Ann Gannon.
Yeah, that's what they're going to end up doing. And they are working on doing that on a place like the 405 in Los Angeles, is they want to take the carpool lane and turn that into toll lanes. That's going to be great.
I love the fact that the equity is the most important thing ever crowd is going to end up making it so the poor people sit in dead stop traffic and the rich people get to breeze through.
Palm Beach County Tax Collector Ann Gannon issued a press release saying, in part, "We are complying with this recent change to the law and have ceased issuing HOV decals." And the change to the law does away with any toll exemptions from the HOV decals. On I-95 in northern Palm Beach County, Yasmin Cholmas, WPBF 25 News.
Wait, if you were in the HOV lane, you didn't have to pay the toll?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of people who are really angry with this.
Well, that's what's going on in Florida. Will we see something like that ever in California? Maybe.
What do you mean now I have to pay? Let's go to Margie in Alhambra. Margie, hello.
Yes, I just had to call about MacArthur Park. Born and raised here, I can't believe she has the nerve to say that park is like family friendly and they play soccer there. It's been a hellhole for years and it could be beautiful. And, it's just like infuriating. It's such a lie. And anybody who's listening to this, and I worked downtown for years, knows it's just dangerous. It's horrible. Anyway, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you for the call. Anyone who actually lives here or frequents Los Angeles on a regular basis understands that you stay away from that park. It's dangerous. It's not safe. They fish bodies out of that pond. How often do we see news stories about that?
It happens more often than you would think. By the way, I love the fact that you could hear in the background of that call that she was listening to us on like a boombox at full volume.
I love it. I wonder if that's what Will Smith was listening to when he did that Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. All right, that's going to do it for us today, but we'll be back tomorrow at noon for another edition of The John Phillips Show.